Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks, the podcast crafted to enlighten individuals and businesses on the path to becoming more sustainable and socially responsible. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, an organisation that supports businesses through consulting and training. Today, I am delighted to be in conversation with Sarah Fulton Vachon, founder and olive oil sommelier at Citizens of Soil, a B Corp. A few weeks ago, I wrote a post about the price of olive oil and questioned whether it was linked to the climate crisis. Luckily, someone tagged Sarah on the post, and as soon as I spoke to her, I knew it was a conversation that I wanted to share. So, Sarah, thank you for being here. How are you?
No, I'm really excited. Yeah, and you're right. It's a very topical conversation piece as I regularly are speaking to people in the industry and even journalists about like what is going on with olive oil prices.
Yeah, I know, it's shocking. I think I went the other day to the supermarket and saw that there was a bottle at about £15. So, it's and when we spoke about it, it was so enlightening to hear more about what is going on. I think let's just start with a little bit about your story and how Citizens of Soil came about and a bit more about what that's about.
Yeah, so Citizens of Soil, we are an olive oil company that sources directly from small batch producers, really across the Mediterranean. We prioritize and work with farmers who are beyond organic, who are doing regenerative agricultural practices. And we also work with groves that are at least 50% female ownership leadership. So one of the things that we do is we have an olive oil club that's increasingly becoming a really fun offering because it allows people to explore all these different varieties. So just like wine, olive oil has different cultivars and varieties that yield different flavors. And some people, like different styles of oil. So it's like a wine club or a coffee club where every month you get to try a different one from another producer and hear a bit about their story and why we find them so inspirational and what maybe really interesting things they're doing from a sustainability perspective on their land. And we also connect those farmers so they're and therefore become like their own little community and are able to share best practices and what they're doing together. And then we also do sell some bottles at places like Waitrose and Selfridges and Fortnum. So really quite premium olive oils. They're often sourced for their flavor and health benefits, but also this nutrition of the land as well.
Yeah, that's great. And you're a B Corp, as I mentioned.
Mm.
When did you become a B Corp, and what was the process like for you, and what made you want to become a B Corp?
Yeah, so I mean, I started the business as this was a side hustle. So the business actually started because we had friends who are really close family friends who we visit, once or twice a year in Crete. They're small batch olive oil producers, and they were making something to this like outstanding quality, but because of the way the commodity supply chain, so olive oil is traded like a commodity, it has set market prices, it is treated like a commodity, and farmers are often really squeezed, and there's no sustainable livelihood, especially for small batch farmers. So I saw this opportunity because I was working in sustainability at the time, and I was doing these deep dives on supply chains in beauty, food, fashion, but particularly in that moment, we were doing some really interesting ones about tomato supply chains and across the Mediterranean. And I was looking at this same problem of like farmers really being squeezed, the impact it has on sometimes migrant labor and other factors, and the impact it has on the land. And so the whole time I was setting up the business, I was still working in sustainability. And I was so fortunate to be surrounded by the company was called Provenance. It's still around, provenance.org. They are pioneers in blockchain technology, showing full traceability and using data to stamp out greenwash. So if a product is claiming it's organic, it's actually pulling through data. If a product is claiming that it's fair pay, it can bring through all these different data points as a tech business to showcase that. So we had, B Corp consultants that we were speaking to. We had carbon consultants on the team. We had, packaging, everything you can imagine from the touch points of sustainability. These consultants are experts around us. And that was the lens I was building the business through. Very much a purpose-driven business to solve real problems that we all see, especially in the space that we're in sustainability. So B Corp was something that at the beginning, I was like, I'm just building a business like this. I might as well get the accreditation, get a certification that is the case, because to Provenance, to my background of wanting to make sure data backed up every statement. It felt like something I had to do as a business. And I will say I went into it quite confident, like, oh, I'm building this, especially when I started the process, it was just me. It was myself and my husband. We didn't have employees. I thought this is going to be a breeze. We're doing all these things. We can show direct contact to the farmers. We can show receipts, how much we pay above the commodity rate. Like, we're totally fine. But that B Corp is a massive undertaking, doesn't matter how big or small your company is. And it was a lot of paperwork, I'd say, a lot of admin and process to set up. But of course, we're extremely proud we did it, because I think, especially as a product business, when you start going into retail, retailers are increasingly looking at that mark as so they don't have to do the work. Honestly, it's like, so they don't have to do full, okay, they're B Corp, which means someone else has kind of gone through and reviewed and analyzed all of this.
That's really interesting. It's trusted, isn't it? And in our consultancy, we take companies through lots and lots of different accreditations. And more I'm finding that supply chains are depending on that and saying, okay, you need to have this accreditation, because they know that it's trusted and that they've gone through the process that is needed. So, I think congratulations to you. And I know, I see sustainability in supermarkets is becoming such a priority. Absolutely. That, for a product, it's really important. I just want to touch actually on a bit more about olive oil, the benefits of olive oil. I've seen recently there's been some challenges about whether olive oil is healthy for you. And I know it's always a little bit, some people say it is, some people say it isn't. Can you share a bit more about that?
Well, I mean, so when we talk about the category of olive oil, we're talking about two things. We're talking about two completely separate products. One is virgin olive oil. So this is extra virgin and regular virgin olive oil. And one is regular olive oil. And regular olive oil is a refined oil. So putting that aside, because that's not what I work with, that is not something I have an expertise in. Of course, I know how it's made, because it's made often from the waste particles that come from the fresh extra virgin olive oil perspective. But fresh or real extra virgin, with that label, extra virgin or virgin olive oils, are simply fruit, olive fruit. It's the juice of that fruit. It is extracted by mechanical means without any heat or chemicals or solvents used. So it's literally just a fresh squeezed juice. And we really need to think about extra virgin olive oil like that in order to understand how to use it and how it has all these health benefits. Whenever you get to refined oils, that is, in order to get refined oils, well, there's a refinement process. It is going through often, heat, chemicals, solvents, sometimes there's bleaching, deodorizing, everything to really stretch and extract as much as possible from that oil. And as a result, you lose most of the health benefits that are coming from the fresh fruit juice. If you think of this, the best way to compare this is to think of fresh squeezed orange juice and orange soda. These are two completely different products. They both have an element of orange, and they both kind of come from that, but they are night and day as far as like nutritional benefits and even occasions we should probably be having them. So I work in the virgin space, and extra virgin is just a step above virgin. It's just a quality indicator, but it's still processed the same way. So this is the world that I work in. And extra virgin olive oil, because it is just a fruit juice that is really, they're separating the water from the oil, and that's what we're getting. It is full of something that is particularly, I don't want to say the word trendy, but it is becoming talked about a lot more lately. But it is this thing called polyphenols. And if anyone has been bombarded with the Zoe ads for the what Dr. Tim Spector is leading on, this health revolution of gut health, they are huge advocates for polyphenols. And polyphenols are simply antioxidants that exist in loads. I mean, fruits and vegetables, all sorts of plants. Every plant has polyphenols, but some have more than others. And olives in particular have a lot of polyphenols, and they also have these polyphenols that only exist in olives. And polyphenols are antioxidants that actually help protect the plant. So they're keeping predators off, they are giving it its bright colors, they're really helping the plant. They are antioxidants. So whenever we consume plants that have high polyphenols, we are consuming a lot of these antioxidants and absorbing them. And the antioxidants in extra virgin olive oil have been proven, you know, for decades now to have direct correlation. They are anti-inflammatory. They're connected to cancer prevention. It's all sorts of things around heart health, degenerative diseases, dementia. There's so many connections, and most recently, a lot more around the gut health as well, that extra virgin olive oil. So people are, while it's been proven for a very long time that it's in this anti-inflammatory space, which we are learning more and more about inflammation in our bodies and how having an anti-inflammatory foods is really good for prevention of diseases and mitigating like issues that you're having with chronic illness. This is why people are excited about extra virgin olive oil. But I would say extra virgin olive oil, while it's in the news right now for its health benefits, since antiquity, it has been touted as a downright medicinal supplement. And if you've spent any time with which I have been fortunate enough to spend time with Greek grandmothers, yayas and nonas in Italy, and, you know, in abuelas in Spain, the whole Mediterranean, olive oil is a cure for a lot of things. It has, like, you know, everything from when a baby is born, what you put on their skin to get rid of cradle cap, to you have an upset stomach, take a spoonful of olive oil, you know, things you can rub on. This is like a known thing in these communities. And there's been a lot of evidence for that over the years. Obviously, we know that the Mediterranean diet is proven as the healthiest diet. You know, it wins like every year, and it's the one that you know, any doctor that's advising on, you know, high blood pressure or any sort of heart disease will advise you to switch to a diet more like the Mediterranean diet, where the cornerstone of that diet is extra virgin olive oil as this incredible plant-based fat that offers you a lot of nutrition alongside just being a fat.
Yeah, great. Oh, I learned so much through that. Now, the thing that I really want to go into is about the climate crisis. I read an article actually on your page, which really, really touched me, and it's how we got into the conversation. Can you talk about how the climate crisis and the production of olive oil, particularly in the regions that you've been working in?
Yeah, I mean, I do hear about it a lot actually in other categories as well, especially other commodities, because they're things that are in all of our homes. You know, olive oil is in most of our kitchens, and sugar and coffee and chocolate. And I'd say I just was at a talk last week where they were speaking about coffee, like, you know, the sustainability around coffee and us losing, you know, the climate crisis and how it is going to affect our coffee yields, and already has. The same thing is happening in olive oil. I'd say it's hit, and I don't know the other categories well enough to speak on them, so I can just say in olive oil, this sits in the Mediterranean basin primarily, which is warming, you know, at a higher average than the, it's heating at a higher rate than the global average. So there are a lot of factors, but mainly what we see with my farmers is, for the last 20 years, you know, I just had a farmer in the Peloponnese region of Greece, and she said, we can tell you, we could have told you 20 years ago that this was coming. Like, we've been watching our harvest and the seasons change right in front of us, shift slowly, but then really progress in the past couple of years. And this is because the climate is changing, it's really affecting the flowering season. So it's affecting pollination cycles, which olive trees need. Actually, wind is a way that they pollinate. And so whenever we're having not consistent springs and summers that are extremely intense, and falls that are bringing in way too much water, whenever it's really kind of shifting the whole pattern, it's meaning that we're losing yield. So last year, what happened in Greece? This is a perfect way to explain it. Greece last year, in some of the regions, we had a really mild winter. So the flowers started to spring and bud way too early. Then all of a sudden, a spring came, I suppose, late, as far as the rains came too late in the season once the flowers were already out, knocked all the flowers off. Well, now we've lost all the fruit and we've lost that. Then any flowers that survived, we had an insane summer last year across the Mediterranean with heat unlike that they had really seen in a very long time, and severe droughts that caused fires. But really this drought, which olive trees are quite tolerant and they really respond well to droughts. So they are actually good in a wider sustainability perspective because they don't require a lot of water and they only get better sometimes under stress. However, when there's no water for a very, very long time and the fruit is extremely stressed, it is going to affect the yield. So whatever olives were left that survived the rainstorms that knocked it off, knocked the buds off, went through the summer, and right before harvest, Too early really came in massive rains and storms that at that point, because there had been no rain at all, the grounds, could not absorb, and it became these floods, and it started to create some bacteria on the olives. So any olives that had survived at that point were just such a poor quality. So it was like we called it the plagues, because it was like everything that could have happened: drought, fire, floods, insects because of the floods, all came together. And I will say olive oil, traditionally, most regions have these like every other year you have a good harvest, like bumper crop. So it's 1 year good, 1 year bad. The problem, what we're facing now across the Mediterranean is multi-year downs. So places like Spain are in a multi-year drought that has affected the production. Spain is the biggest producer of extra virgin olive oil, or of olive oil, in the world. And when you knock out, 40% of its production, and then somewhere like Greece this year, we had farmers who are down 90%, you are taking out huge chunks of production and of extra virgin olive oil. And this is kind of what one of the main reasons we're facing shortages, not to mention all the health benefits and the reasons people are starting to enter the category. So it's compounded by the fact that there's more interest than ever. But it's really that the climate patterns have changed in a way that the farmers haven't been able to completely mitigate. And it's putting immense pressure on them to produce a yield that is just no longer sustainable. And so when you're already a small farmer and you already had a small yield and now it's down substantially, it doesn't make it a livelihood that can support you anymore.
No, and that must be like generation after generation that have had these maybe smaller farm, and they're just completely knocked out because they can't afford to carry on anymore.
What's crazy is this year, I mean, I was in Sicily this summer, and there were so many fires. I mean, we were driving and we must have seen like 15 fires on like a short drive all over the place. And we were asking, and we already knew that the shortages were coming, and we were talking to some different farmers, and some people were like, we're not even going to harvest because there's just not enough fruit. It's not worth the effort to pay the labor, to get all the machinery, all of this. It's not worth the cost, because they were recognizing that the international market is only going to pay a certain, they can't charge what it would actually cost to produce that. But some farmers just still took that hit. They wanted something, and so they were still producing. But you think of it, I find it crazy this year when people are desperate to get extra virgin olive oil, that there were farmers that were like, it's not worth the effort, and literally leaving whatever fruit they had on the trees. Because of the cost. And also harvest this year in some regions was extremely difficult because the rains that came in really strong. My producer in Croatia, she said it was the most difficult harvest they've ever done, and it rained every single day for like 40 days, which means that she's out there harvesting olives which don't like to be harvested in the rain. It lowers the quality, frankly. It removes a lot of the polyphenols, these antioxidants kind of get flushed out with the water. And yet she was out there, in tractors and by hand trying to get as much just to have some yield.
Yeah. So is this all the reason for the price increases then?
Yeah, so the climate factor is significant because it is affecting yields substantially. I mean, God, I go every year to Greece. I do the harvest myself with our family who we started the business with. And every year, even last year, it was a little down, but it's beautiful. You can see, you walk up to the trees and they're full of the olives. Like they're just like drooping with olives. And it's such a lovely experience. And you're, getting them out of the trees this year. And you feel bags and bags this year. You do all the same work because you're having to go tree to tree and you're having to comb every tree, but you're filling just like smaller containers, and you're working all day for a fraction, whereas we would fill these big tanks and we'd load up a truck before with olives and take it to the mill. This year, we were lucky to fill a small amount. You could just see the difference of a day's work. So that's really hard that the yield is down. As a result of yield being down, there's a lot of like theft and fraudulent practices, things happening in the industry, because extra virgin olive oil is a premium this year. The price you can get on the commodity market, even for virgin oil, which isn't even the extra grade of virgin oil, cost more than an extra virgin last year on the market. So it's like all the prices are so high. And so criminals and organized crime, they see a real great opportunity with this. So there was a lot of theft. I mean, every one of my producers has some story about olives being stolen right off the trees, the olives that they've assembled being stolen, oil. I talked to mills who have had oil been stolen from the mills. We even have one producer who had trees, baby trees uprooted. So there is, I mean, the headlines this year and the stories we were not only seeing in the news, but hearing directly from our farmers, there was so much theft. And then, of course, oil being, cut with other oils like refined oils. And there's also like a bit of, old oil still coming through the market. So there's a lot of like fraudulent activities. And we got so many samples actually this year sent from Greece that were not extra virgin. Like people were submitting and sending through, you could taste it and you could tell. I mean, this is why I got my olive oil sommelier accreditation, so I could make sure I could understand what was good and bad. And so many oils were just not of a high standard that would have never been called extra virgin last year or the year before. But this year, because it is gold, they're somehow getting through, getting someone on a panel to say that this is extra virgin and being able to export it as such. So there's a lot of dodgy stuff, which is also increasing the prices. And then, like I said, the demand for extra virgin olive oil has never been higher. Not only because of the health benefits and what people are talking about, even here in the West, where we've always used extra virgin olive oil, but now it's moving into whole new markets. Like, I mean, gosh, I just spoke to somebody in China who is wanting to make, big orders. So it's massive in Asia. The US is a huge market, but new places are opening up. And aside from the immediate climate crisis, there is a virus that has, it's a bacteria that has swept Italy's biggest producing region, Puglia, which produces the most olive oil in Italy, and it has knocked out over 20 million trees.
Oh gosh.
It's like actually a graveyard. I was just at an event for an organization called Save the Olives. I was speaking at an event a couple weeks ago, and they were showing some of the stuff they're doing to combat this, but it is devastating. I mean, to lose that, I mean, just that statement alone, like 20 million trees are out of production in the biggest producing region, and it's still spreading, is creating a lot of chaos in the industry.
I find it, I still find it baffling that there are people that don't believe what's going on. I'm in the UK today, we're coming into June. It literally not a blue part in the sky, that people don't believe that it's, oh yeah, this is normal, this is fine. And then you hear stories like this about a whole industry that is almost being wiped out in places.
Yeah.
That's going to be devastating for countries, for regions that just won't be able to do that anymore. And people that have been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years, what are they expected to do? Just change their...
I mean, I think farmers everywhere, I feel I have a huge appreciation and affection for farmers. I come from a family of farmers in the US. All my grandparents were farmers. But yeah, you're exactly right that there are certain communities in the Mediterranean who, I mean, forget 30, 40 years, they are still working on groves that were planted by their ancestors. Like, I have farmers that this grove, they can trace it back for hundreds of years that's been in their family. The olive trees in particular, unlike other crops, they do live for what we call like eternity. They are eternal trees. They live for thousands of years. They can live for thousands of years. So, for example, a couple of years ago for my birthday, I was in Crete visiting our family, and all I wanted to do was see this ancient olive tree. So I drove out to this one that was over 3,000 years old, and to
Wow.
see a living monument that is still there and still producing fruit, and still you can make oil from this tree, it's the most beautiful thing. This thing has been, it's like before Christ, it's like before modern civilizations, this tree was there. And you see a lot more of those. I mean, I went to one in Portugal. Anywhere in the Mediterranean, I highly recommend looking up. They're usually called monumental trees, monumental olive trees, and you can find a really old, and they're gnarled and they're beautiful. But they are fixtures of the landscape. And this is one of the reasons that in certain parts of the Mediterranean, it's very emotional to lose these trees or to not be able to work with them anymore because of an ancestral connection back to your family and that community. And imagine, this is Puglia. Puglia has beautiful old trees that have been knocked out. And it is really difficult for people who were forced to like cut them down and remove them so the virus, so the bacteria wasn't spreading, because the significance of what that has meant in your family.
Yeah, it really it is moving when you think about it and what is happening. Something else that I really wanted to touch on was your commitment to fair and equitable practices. You champion female farmers. Can you tell me a bit more about how empowering female farmers contributes to the overall sustainability and resilience of the olive oil industry?
Yeah, well, again, relating it to wider farming, women, there's a much lower rate of female farmers in most every industry. Olive oil in particular, and wine, sometimes these quite old patriarchal societies in the Mediterranean still function where the men, until recent times, men were still inheriting, or they were still getting the land. Your sons would inherit the land. So female ownership and decision making of their land is really important. I think it's very important for women in the wider world as well. Whenever farmers get to keep their land, and women, the ownership of land and the ownership of women is like quite intrinsically connected. But also women, particularly in olive oil, they've always been a part of the harvest. So even if it was, not their land, it goes back to ancient times. All these stories of women being a part of the harvest, collecting, it was something that they were able to do. And nowadays, we fast forward, and while we're still underrepresented in farming, what we tend to find, and my husband actually says this really best, which I quite like, because sometimes whenever you're a woman making a case for other women, people are like, of course they're just picking women. But whenever, my husband comes in and is like, no, we're not just sourcing from them because they're women. We're sourcing from them because, he says, one, unlike the men, they've often, who have been passed down, here's how we do it, we're just doing it this way, and they've been passed down this legacy of how we farm, and just kind of going with what their father taught them, like they learned it from their father, who learned it from their father. The women, who have also been in this environment and harvesting since they were kids, have taken that, but almost as a lack of confidence, they've gone on to study and do hours and hours. We've had some farmers do hundreds of hours of coursework to learn about grove management, to learn about new agricultural practices, to learn about mill management. So they've done all this extra education, which is combining some of the old romantic qualities with the modern day new things that we know we need for land, because we are no longer farming the same land that we used to. We have degraded the land since World War II in most places. The whole agricultural system has been a terrible decline because of modern machinery and chemicals used. And so we can't continue farming the way we have for the past 50 years. Maybe we can go back to how we were farming 300 years ago, but we can't go back to the past couple of decades. So these women are coming in with new practices, which is really innovating, not only from the farming perspective of bringing in regenerative and organic practices, but also from even the milling side, bringing in techniques and processes that is making a higher quality oil. So it is better farming, but also they tend to prioritize flavor and nutrition, especially. Nutrition and sustainability are two things that we find these female farmers just are really focused on. And then of course, it's nice to have equality in the groves. A lot of the regions that I go to, Crete in particular, which I just know better because I do a lot of my harvest there, I go to the mill and it's me and I don't know, 50, 60 men, and it's all men. And this year I took someone on my team with me, and I was like, welcome to the boys club. Like, there's a man, there's a man. It's all men. We're all surrounded by men. And I know from my own farmers, the women that I work with, that often they feel quite isolated. And, we're talking about rural parts of these old school, Mediterranean cultures, the sort of places that, you walk out in Crete, you go to the local coffee shop in the town, and it's a boys club. It's all men, like women are not in these like public forums in the same way. And so to have that same situation when you're going to the mill or the cooperative and feel like you're the only woman in the room isn't exactly a comforting, nice feeling in any situation, be it a boardroom or any office, any place of work. And they often kind of get a bit excluded from that whole community of olive oil production. So one of the things we've done is, with these women who are sometimes the only woman in their area making olive oil, we're connecting them with each other. So they have this network of women across the Mediterranean. So our farmer in the east side of Crete, who is like, I think the only female farmer in her region, is connected, to this woman in Portugal, and they're talking about organic composting together and sharing. So that is, yes, women are fantastic farmers, for just like men can be fantastic farmers, but we do like to champion them. And I find it interesting. I think I might have told you when we were chatting before, there's something that women do, particularly in processing, because farming, a lot of the modern machine, it's not designed for us physically. A lot of the machinery is, and a lot of the processes are kind of built for men. It's really heavy lifting and a lot of things. Well, when women farm, we do it slightly differently, because we can't necessarily carry, not all women can carry the same amount, throw a 50-pound bag of olive oil over their, or olives over their shoulder, but they would get these smaller baskets. Well, the smaller baskets, which they could carry, actually prevent the olives from overheating and fermenting, which starts to break them down before they get to the mill. And so as a result, the smaller baskets is a better way to produce olive oil and to get it to the mill. And so you have a better quality from that than you do with like the 50, 100-pound bag of olives that the men throw over their shoulders. And in an instant, like this is a perfect instance of actually that benefiting the quality as well.
That's interesting. Gosh, it's such a change in way just by finding out these things. You work a lot with farmers that use regenerative farming techniques. Can you elaborate on that and actually talk a little bit about how these practices help preserve biodiversity and soil quality? Because that's so important too.
Yeah, I mean, regenerative is definitely a buzzword in sustainability.
Yeah.
And I will say there's not a lot of regulation around it at all. I mean, we're looking at different certifications, but none are like soil association level, or like how organic is quite, regulated. Regenerative, I feel like can be a bit dodgy because there's not enough regulation. However, we state our criteria as when we're sourcing from farmers to be the following. Organic is the baseline. So that means removing, chemicals and synthetics, any synthetic fertilizers. It needs to be to like an EU standard of organic farming is what we're looking for. But then on top of that, it's about building in, to your point, biodiversity and life back into the groves and everything for soil health. So other than being organic, we are looking for groves that also have low or no tilling, which is whenever they are uprooting all the vegetation and plants. In olive oil production, it's very easy actually to be organic, because you can just remove all life from the grove. So you just have the trees and bare soil. Because olive trees are really resilient, they will grow in places like that. They grow very well in North Africa in extreme heat. And that's really easy to be organic because nothing else will grow, and there's not even a blade of grass. So of course you don't have bugs because there's no life in that grove except for the tree. But we actually want and look for ground cover and look for something that is not keeping the soil completely exposed, keeping that carbon in, keeping that life in. We know, I'm sure your audience knows more about soil health than others, but it's very important to have really healthy soil and not degrade that soil, because once we lose the life of soil, well, we lose the life of all of our food, because we can't grow things in it anymore. So we want people to preserve that, especially in olive trees, olive groves. Traditional olive groves were very spaced out. So there's a lot of land to capture carbon, to have life in those groves, to build other plants in. So then the next thing we're looking for, other than ground cover, is actually building in biodiversity. So this means we do not like groves that are monocultivar, monocrop, only have olive trees. We are looking for either other ground cover plants that have been brought in, other tree types. So, our farmers in Greece, who we really started this model with, they are growing, because they're small batch farmers, they often have this permaculture model of other things that they're growing on the land in order to like live off of. So they're doing wild herbs is really common, like oregano, and like greens that they're using in the winter. So those grow between the trees. They also planted in other fruit trees because they just want to enjoy, they have citrus and pomegranates. We also did bay trees, a lot of wild herbs and things. So it's different. It varies farmer to farmer, but it's all about whatever you're either using for your own food or other crops, but bringing in that biodiversity and encouraging nature in general. That's one of the things our farmers often share on the chat of, little bunnies they find on the grove, or even snakes or any sort of animal, like sharing the biodiversity that exists, because these modern industrial groves have no life. You know, there is nothing living in those trees. There is nothing around. You can, you know, sometimes I turn on my camera on the groves and I set it down on the ground. And if it's an industrial grove, you hear nothing, you hear the wind. But if it's a grove that's alive, you hear a symphony of insects and sounds happening, which is just important, which is very
Oh,
important.
beautiful.
And the final thing, we do like to have them incorporate grazing animals. We know that things from animals are really good for the land. So if they can't bring in grazing animals, then it's about bringing in, you know, that's the fertilizer, the organic sheep's manure or chicken manure. There's different things we use. So that's kind of what we look at, but with regenerative, building back and definitely not having synthetics in there. And that's how we work with them. And as a result, you know, I was just at a talk last night with, it was Natura, which is a food company that sources like beautiful ingredients, often for chefs. And they were speaking with Tim Spector and Dr. Tim Spector about gut health. And they were talking about, you know, the gut microbiome and how the soil has this as well. And you get better, more beautiful polyphenol rich fruit and veg whenever it's in this healthy environment. And then that's also making you more healthy. So this connection to healthier soils and healthier food and a healthier you is intrinsically connected.
Yeah, which is just going to do you so much good. And I guess this is where organic comes in, when you know it's more natural, you know it's going to be better for you. I worry all the time now about what I'm putting into my body and where it's come from. And, you know, I've done talks with people about plastic particles that are in our bodies, that it's really worrying, the
Yeah.
number of you know, my mum is going through cancer treatment at the moment, and I think it's now 1 in 2 people get cancer, and it's worrying about where is our food coming from and what is in it and how it's made. So that organic and more biodiverse and regenerative farming, I just think it's so important for the future of food.
Yeah, and I do think that regenerative practice, it is like the next organic.
Yeah.
It's just going to come to a point that organic won't be enough because, like I said, organic practices still allow you to kind of remove all life to prevent bugs, and so that you don't have to use pesticides and things, depending on the crop. And so, particularly in olive oil, that is the reason that organic is not enough for us. It has to have additional steps being brought in.
Mm, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your social value that you do and how the initiatives align with your mission and what you hope to achieve through any of these partnerships?
The social value, you mean like our turning a commodity bit?
The charities and partnerships
Oh,
that
yes.
you work
Okay,
with in the
yes.
community, yeah.
Yeah, so we are a 1% for the Planet business. And we currently all that money goes to so it's 1% of your total sales, not just profit, which I think is really important. A lot of businesses say, and this is back to my old sustainability days, a lot of businesses are like, we give a part of our profits, you know, and especially small businesses. I'm like, you're not making a profit for so long. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you would never have to give money. I was consulting on a small brand, and I remember telling him, you cannot do it as profit because you're not going to be profitable for so long. It's not going to make any difference. So 1% for the planet is good because you submit your P&L, and you're kind of submitting your accounts over to them, and they're making you pay based on how much you sold. And we chose to we do soil regeneration charities, things aligned with that. So we've done Soil Association, which we're also a member of, and that's how we are also certified Soil Association, to start bringing over organic oils, certified organic oils. I will say all of our oils have always been organic, but sometimes we have very small farmers and they're not fully certified. And now bringing things over post-Brexit that are certified organic, it is a more difficult process. So we have had some struggles properly bringing over fully like organic products throughout the whole chain of custody all the way to the UK. So yeah, Soil Association is really important, as is we do Sustainable Soils Alliance is another, and then Kiss the Ground, which is actually a wider global, I'm sure, yeah, you're smiling. I don't know if you've heard of Kiss the Ground, the movie. It's very a great documentary that came out several years ago, and it's something we've actually shared with even our farmers because it's in different languages. So we've shared that with them whenever they're kind of just starting, or whenever we have farmers reach out to us that they want to work with us. We're like, here's a nice digestible way to get your head around why regenerative practices and soil health is so important. But that's really our focus for everything.
Oh, beautiful. Something else that you really put a priority on is to minimize packaging and waste and recycling and refills. Do you want to share a little bit more about your efforts in implementing a circular model?
Yeah, I mean, as a business, my first priority is to small batch farmers and helping them have beautiful, healthy land, and that's really what we focus on. But because I overly ambitious came to this project while working in the sustainability space, I always thought it was quite wasteful, especially with luxury products who increasingly make beautiful packaging. You know, you think of your beautiful perfume bottles or makeup, or even like consumer goods, wine bottles and things that are just very beautiful labels and nice corks. And you think, God, I'm going to throw this away. Like it doesn't need to be thrown away. I could reuse this. And so, from the very beginning, I was like, well, I want to make something that, you know, it's going to have to be premium because of the prices that I'm paying the farmer and because we're quite small in this process. So I was like, if I'm going to have a premium oil, I need to have a beautiful bottle and a container, but it has to have refills. Like I have to make this option as lightweight as possible so people aren't throwing away all this beautiful stuff that I'm giving them every time. And that's where pouches came in. So it is something that we continue to work on and try to make a better system. But right now, what it means is that we have our glass bottles, and then we also have these pouches that you can use to refill the bottle or your own vessel. A lot of people have beautiful olive oil decanters or, you know, ceramics at home that they want to use. So you can just top it up there. The pouches are 15 times less carbon than our glass bottles, just on a like for like. That doesn't even include, if you buy from our website, our bottles we have to kind of wrap in loads of different things. You know, it's all paper packaging, but we have to wrap it up so much in order to send it to you, versus the pouch, you know, it can just go right through the letterbox. It doesn't require they don't break, you know, it's not shipping around heavy you know, heavy glass, which has its own, breakages is like kind of the main thing that you face when you're shipping around glass. And then we also, because those are a multi-layer plastic, we do take those back. So people can send them back to us. We have a free post address, we collect them, and we process them currently with TerraCycle, which means that we're able to break down all the particles completely and put them back in the system to be reused, which gives us, you know, a much greater guarantee of that circularity than curbside recycling or anything like that. And it is that part of it is really a work in progress. I would like to not use plastic in all honesty, because I don't want to use rely on the fuel industry to have to get anything from petrol. However, we have spent a couple of years actually talking to all sorts of sustainability consultants and circularity people, and it's very particular what sort of plastic you can use with food grade. Extra virgin olive oil is very temperamental, so it has to be this multi-layer plastic, which is has like aluminized. And from a quality perspective, putting olive oil, especially refills, like in larger formats for chefs and even home use, those big tins, they start to oxidize so quickly. And by the time you've gotten to the bottom, that oil is just ruined. So the thing about a bag and box or a pouch, it enables you to preserve the extra virgin olive oil or wine. I mean, you think of now they're doing beautiful wine in bag and box. For wine, it preserves it like 6 weeks, which is crazy to be able to not have to waste wine, and you can have a little glass here or there. Extra virgin olive oil is the same. It keeps it so much longer, so fresh. I mean, we had a producer I was talking to last week. She's been doing bag and box for 5 years. She's opened up oils 3 years on that still have a nice flavor, which is just unheard of, because it just keeps it in such good quality. So we've used this for a mix of quality and it being the best in the industry, but with the idea that at least if we're fully taking it back and processing it, that we are able to close that loop.
Amazing. I honestly, I listen to you. I'm learning so much. I love the way that you think about the business, the effort and the extra effort that you go into with everything. You know, that's how, if every business was like that and really sort of push themselves to think that bit further, then we wouldn't be in the climate crisis that we are. My final question is, how do you envision the future of the olive oil industry?
So I do think we are certainly for the next couple of years going to be up against these higher prices because of shortages in the traditional regions that have grown olive oil. That said, there are whole new regions laying out trees every day. And also the existing regions bringing in a lot of my farmers are testing varieties that are more resilient to heat and able to bring, more productive. So, we have places like Latin America, which have, grown olives for hundreds of years because the Spanish missions brought them over, but now they're expanding, Australia, whole new pockets. So we will have extra virgin olive oil because, like I said, olive trees are very resilient and can grow. So while the productivity is down in some of these regions, they can grow in really extreme heat. They can grow. I mean, they've been in the Middle East. This is where they came from. They've been living in these like desert conditions. They're really good for erosion. So even here in the UK, you're seeing farmers bring them in. So there will be a future for the eternal tree because it's always been with us, since antiquity, and it will continue to, because also from a nutritional perspective, value for what it can offer is absolutely outstanding. But I think like a lot of things, especially in the UK, who we pay the lowest GDP per out of any European country for food. We pay less than anyone else in Europe for our food. We are going to have to come to grips with the fact that we do need to invest. Maybe we should stop spending so much money on fast fashion and other things and invest a little bit more in our food as a means of health and appreciation of farmers. But yeah, there will be a future for olive oil. It will outlive us all.
I'm pleased to hear that. I have an olive tree in my garden, and it's getting bigger each year, but it's not produced olives yet. But there's hope for me yet.
There certainly is.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much for educating us, educating me. This to me, the second I put that post and somebody tagged you, I just wanted to understand, because I think this is the future, how we are changing if we don't do something and change our business models and change the way that we live and work and everything. So hearing from you about how you're doing it at Citizens of Soil is very inspiring. Thank you for what you do. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, really lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.